On our panel today, we have Pavle Milic. Pavle, and you can remember his name because it's very lovely, is the owner of F&B Restaurant, which is going to be celebrating its first birthday on November 28th. And if you've been hanging around here all day, you probably know this guy. He's the infamous Todd from Dos Cabezas. Pavle's restaurant, in its very short year in business, has been lauded by publications like the New York Times, the Wine Library TV, Time Magazine. Locally, F&B has been voted Best New Restaurant by Phoenix Magazine, Phoenix New Times, and the Arizona Republic. And there's a rumor that I heard just recently that the next Food and Wine magazine is going to feature a Best New Dish from F&B Restaurant, paired with a wine from Arizona. So it's never been done before that a fine dining establishment located in the heart of Scottsdale has taken the big leap to basically compile a list that strictly represents wines from Arizona. I think that today we have a great opportunity to understand a little bit more about why this is such a monumentous event for those of us who follow food and wine, and also the Arizona wine growing scene. Because, you know, you dine in New York City and everyone says, Arizona? Like, you know, don't you all wear cowboy hats and big belts there and drive big trucks? You know, people don't really think of Arizona as the prime address for great wine. I think if you've been walking around and tasting today, though, you'll see that we have every opportunity to produce stellar wine in Arizona, as they do in California and Oregon, and even in upstate New York. So I'm gonna hand the microphone over to Pavle because earlier this year, he organized an event called The Judgment of Arizona, where basically he went through and very painstakingly with a panel of wine experts, so-called wine experts, and chose some of the best wines in Arizona and then tasted them blind against some of the best wines, not just in the United States, but some of the best wines in the world. And this panel voted on these wines just to see where Arizona fell within the continuum of great wine. And I think the result really shows that Arizona, while we might have just a very small core of wineries that have reached the level of world-class wine, we do have world-class wine in this state, and wines that can compete on the world stage. So I'd like Pavle to explain a little bit about how this idea came about, how F&B came to be the place for Arizona wine.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Well, my name is Pavle Milic, and I guess I'm going to answer a question now because it might come up a little bit later. My full name is Pavle Milic Jovanovic. So for takeout, I say Joe. So I'll tell you where I'm from very quickly. My dad defected communist Yugoslavia in 1962, which, by the way, some of you here have heard this story before. He wound up in Colombia, South America, where he met Mom, and I happened. I grew up in Queens, New York, with a pack of Jews and Italians. So I can say Shabbat Shalom on the weekends, drink grappa, and break somebody else's leg. And the last part is a total lie. I've never done that. Anyways, Arizona Wines at F&B. I opened up the restaurant with a very limited budget, and when you go out on your own for the first time, it's scary, it's nerve-wracking. And I remember opening up and we had $1,200 in the bank account. And if you talk to anybody that's in business, that's, well, that's not even, you couldn't even call that operational capital. Well, here we are a year later and things have paid off. I think it was the second week into operations that Charlene was talking about her operating standard when it comes to sourcing, which is local, organic, and sustainable whenever possible. And it came to mind that I've had, maybe 10 years ago, I have tasted Ken Callaghan's wines. But back in the day, to me, it was a wine that I've enjoyed, but then it just turned into a novelty of sorts. Like, I just forgot about it. I went back to drinking, I'm a draconian Pinophile, so I always like to drink Pinot Noir, and I kind of forgot about it. I had just returned from wine country, from Napa Valley, where I spent 3 of the most charming years of my life. It's just God's country out there. And the operating standard with most restaurants out there is that whenever possible, you give a tip of the hat to the guys that are, planting vines in their backyard. And even up to a certain extent, wine lists in Napa are even a little political, because everyone wants a little presence on the list. So having said that, I just had come back to Arizona, and it was an issue that Charlene was talking about sourcing, and I just posed a question. I said, man, I wonder if there's enough good wine in Arizona to author a list, and it was a very innocent question. If I rewind maybe 6 months back, I was the general manager of a restaurant in the Intercontinental Monte Lucia Resort and Spa called Prado. And it was the type of job that it was hoity-toity. I had to wear a suit, a tie. I had to hide these a little bit. And one day, Sam Pillsbury walked in. And for any of you that know Sam Pillsbury, he does not wear a suit. So he was a fresh of breath air. He came in and he was wearing a white beater and a shirt and a cap to the side. And he came in all scattered and said, hey, you want to try some local wine? And I saw like the crazy eye, and I'm like, sure, man, let's go, let's do it. Anyways, I found myself giving Sam backhanded compliments and saying, this does not taste like Arizona wine. Are you sure this is Arizona wine? So after that tasting, the result was that we did a couple of winemaker dinners, and the guests loved the wine. I had a good number of people that just came to the restaurant to do what they thought was the right thing, meaning being a part of the community. If you're from Arizona, gosh darn it, why not formulate your own opinion and at least go try them once? So although at the beginning it was a little nerve-wracking for me, but I'm a nervous being by default, I also showed at the beginning a lot of support. Valentine's Day of this year, it was the business edition, the national business, the national edition of the New York Times. In the business section, my mug was half the page. And it was just, basically they were talking about the sustainability of a local grower movement, and they talk about my decision to carry Arizona wines. So that's how we got to that point. After the New York Times came out, certainly I'm getting reservations from all over the country of people that just want to come and try the wine. So that's what led me to create the list. What led me to the judgment was the fact that I was experiencing a lot of knee-jerk or negative feedback. And I'll just use one more example of what I consider a demographic. A gentleman who belongs to the Phoenix chapter of the Commanderie de Bordeaux. And I only talk about him because he does represent a specific demographic of people whose cellars are replete with what's considered, well, a benchmark or very good wine in the world. Came in and he had one of Ken's wines with a chicken dish and he liked it. Then for dessert, he wanted a little blue cheese and he said, pick a glass of something red for me. So I came back with a glass of red wine, which was something that was gifted to me by a local winemaker. It was not on the list. So I returned to the gentleman and I said, here you go, here's your glass of wine. It's not on the list. He automatically assumed it was not Arizona wine. And I gave him the whole spiel once again. If you can guess where it's from, I'll buy you, I forget what it was, maybe the cheese. I came back and he was sure after, examining all the vicissitudes of the retronasal olfactory attributes that it was indeed an Amarone, because it was kind of pruny, but it was stoic, it was dusty, and it was an Italian Amarone. I then returned and showed him a bottle of the Petit Syrah from Sam Pillsbury, and the gentleman dropped his jaws and said, thank you so much for dropping the veil, because we are so used to, we all know what we like, and I always revert back to what I like. But he said, thank you so much, because this is a huge sort of mind-opening experience for me. So the next day he emailed Sam and thanked him very much and ordered some wine to lay down next to the big boys. And that's really what I wanted to accomplish. The tasting was born out of that once the wines were on the list, certainly they're not good and people were giving me a hard time. And I said, if only we can table these wines in a blind setting, then I think we have a shot. And it was a nerve-wracking shot for me. I was on blood thinners for like 3 months.
True story.